This is impossible! Gunnery Sergeant Blake Rodriguez's voice cracked across range 400 at 29 Palms like a rifle shot. The 31-year-old Marine Scout sniper instructor stood behind his spotting scope, staring at the heat-shimmering steel target 1,200 meters downrange that had defeated every attempt his elite students could devise. For 6 hours, the Corps' most promising snipers had taken turns with their precision M40A6 rifles, each confident they could nail the challenging shot. The target remained untouched, mocking their modern equipment and years of intensive training. Staff Sergeant Chen lowered his rifle with visible frustration, the 27-year-old sniper's face flushed with embarrassment. "Gunny, the Mirage is playing hell with the optics. Every time I think I've got the wind figured out, it shifts." The other Marines nodded grimly, their expensive equipment scattered around like remnants of a failed siege. Harold Hank Morrison had been watching the Marines' futile efforts from his position near the range maintenance shed. At 79 years old, he looked exactly like his identification claimed, a civilian contractor responsible for range upkeep. His weathered hands, stained with decades of honest work, gripped a worn toolbox containing basic maintenance equipment. He wore his usual faded red work shirt that had survived more wash cycles than most Marines had deployments, blue jeans with permanent grass stains, and worn work boots. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and his pale blue eyes held the quiet intelligence of someone who had spent a lifetime solving problems others couldn't. Morrison had been employed at 29 Palms for 8 years, maintaining the ranges that trained America's finest marksmen. Rodriguez finally noticed the old man standing nearby. "Sir, this is a restricted training area. You need to clear the range until we complete this exercise." Morrison nodded politely but made no move to leave. "Just watching, son. That's quite a challenge you're facing out there." His voice carried calm authority that seemed out of place from a maintenance worker. Rodriguez's patience was wearing thin after hours of failure. "Sir, I need you to move to a safe distance. We're conducting precision marksmanship training." Morrison looked at the distant target, then at the scattered equipment, then back at the frustrated Marines. "Wind's shearing out there," Morrison said, almost to himself. "Rolls off the saddle, stalls in that bowl before the plate. Right to left on the glass looks real, but it'll hand the bullet a surprise on the last 100. Several Marines paused their equipment checks. Lance Corporal Evans bristled with irritation. "Thanks for the fairy tale, old man." Morrison smiled with patient understanding. "Just reading what the Mirage is telling me, son. That shimmer you're seeing isn't just heat distortion. It's showing you exactly what the air is doing between here and your target." Staff Sergeant Martinez looked up from his ballistic computer. "How would you know about Mirage reading?" Morrison's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. The slight slouch of an elderly maintenance worker straightened into something that looked suspiciously like military bearing. "I've seen similar conditions before, son. Different place, different time, but same basic principles." Rodriguez's skepticism was evident in his voice. "Sir, with all due respect, Mirage reading is advanced sniper craft that takes years to master. It's not something you learn from watching." Morrison smiled with the expression of someone who had mastered this skill decades ago. "Son, I've been reading Mirage patterns since before you were born. Your ballistic computers are calculating average conditions, but this shot requires reading instantaneous changes. The air between here and that target is like a river with currents and eddies." Morrison pointed toward specific areas of the target zone. "See that thermal inversion at 800 meters? It's creating a wind shear that's throwing your shots low and left." Morrison's mind suddenly drifted to another time, another place entirely. The California desert faded away, replaced by the oppressive humidity and constant danger of a Vietnamese jungle. He wasn't 79 anymore. He was 23, a young staff sergeant with the 1st Marine Division lying motionless behind an M40A1 rifle in a carefully constructed hide overlooking a North Vietnamese supply route. The year was 1969, and Morrison was operating with Force Recon deep in enemy territory. His spotter, Corporal Williams from rural Montana, lay beside him with high-powered binoculars, systematically scanning the jungle trail below. "Movement, 2 o'clock, approximately 1,100 meters," Williams whispered. Morrison adjusted his position with practiced precision, settling the rifle more firmly into his shoulder. Through his scope's magnification, he could distinguish individual figures moving with tactical discipline along the hidden trail. Morrison began his mental calculations with methodical precision that had kept him alive through 2 previous tours. Distance, 1,100 meters. Wind, variable and unpredictable, shifting as thermal currents rose from heated jungle floor. Humidity, oppressive and thick enough to measurably affect bullet trajectory. The shot, when it came, was absolutely perfect. The .308 Winchester round traveled the 1,100 meters in just over a second, striking the enemy commander's center mass and dropping him instantly. Williams looked at Morrison with something approaching awe. "Jesus, Hank, I've never seen shooting like that." Back on the California range, Morrison's eyes slowly refocused on the young Marines surrounding him. "The secret," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying authority that made nearby Marines stop their activities, "isn't fighting the conditions. It's becoming part of them. That mirage isn't your enemy. It's your guide." Rodriguez felt his authority being challenged by an elderly maintenance worker in front of his students. "Sir, this is Marine Corps precision marksmanship training. I'm going to need you to clear the area immediately." Morrison remained exactly where he was, his pale blue eyes studying the target with methodical attention that spoke of decades of experience. The confrontation had reached what appeared to be an absolute stalemate when Lance Corporal Martinez made a decision that would fundamentally change everything. "Gunny," Martinez said carefully, "what if we let him try, just to prove that modern training and equipment make the difference?" Rodriguez's face darkened considerably. "Martinez, are you seriously suggesting we allow some random civilian to shoot on our range?" Morrison's expression didn't change, but something in his bearing suggested he had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Morrison walked back to his maintenance shed and returned carrying what appeared to be an antique. The rifle was an original M40A1 from the Vietnam era, its walnut stock worn smooth by decades of handling. The barrel's bluing had faded to gunmetal gray, and the unertl scope mounted on top looked like something from a museum. Rodriguez stared at the ancient weapon with disbelief. "Sir, that rifle went out of service before some of my Marines were born. You can't seriously expect to hit anything at 1,200 meters with that relic?" Morrison checked the rifle's action with movements so practiced they seemed automatic. "This rifle and I have considerable history together, Gunnery Sergeant. She's never let me down when it mattered." Staff Sergeant Chen studied the old rifle with professional interest. The weapon showed obvious signs of heavy use, but appeared to be meticulously maintained. Every component was clean, properly adjusted, and clearly functional despite its age. That's when Chen noticed something that made his professional instinct sharpen. The rifle's serial number and unit markings suggested it was more than just a collector's piece. "Gunny," Chen said quietly, "what if I contact range control, just to verify his credentials?" Rodriguez nodded curtly, thinking this would finally resolve the situation. Chen walked toward communications equipment, but instead of calling range control immediately, he decided to contact Master Sergeant Valdez first. "Master Sergeant, this is Chen at range 400, he said when Valdez answered. "We have a developing situation with an elderly civilian claiming shooting expertise. Says his name is Harold Morrison, carrying what appears to be an original M40A1 from the Vietnam era." There was an unusually long pause on the other end of the line. When Master Sergeant Valdez finally spoke again, his voice carried tension Chen had never heard before. "Chen, did you say Harold Morrison with an M40A1? The silence stretched for 5 full seconds. "Sweet mother of God," Valdez said, and Chen could hear papers rustling frantically.
Chen, listen to me very carefully. Do not allow anyone to lay a single hand on Harold Morrison. Do you understand me completely? Not a single finger on that man." Chen felt his stomach drop into his boots. In 3 years of knowing Master Sergeant Valdez, he had never heard him sound genuinely panicked about anything. "Master Sergeant, what's happening here?" "I need to make several urgent phone calls immediately." "Chen, that man is definitely not a confused civilian. Keep the entire situation completely calm and respectful until I can get there personally." The line went dead abruptly. Chen returned to the firing line where the standoff continued unchanged. Rodriguez was still arguing with Morrison, who maintained his patient, dignified demeanor despite increasingly hostile treatment from the young Marines. Before Chen could explain the conversation, they all heard the unmistakable sound of multiple vehicles approaching at high speed across the base. Heavy engines, moving fast, coming up the access road toward their isolated range. The distinctive whine of turbocharged diesel engines pushed to their absolute limits, creating dust clouds visible from miles away. Morrison remained exactly where he had been throughout the entire confrontation, patient and dignified, still holding the ancient rifle. But something subtle in his expression had changed slightly. There was the faintest suggestion of a knowing smile.
The convoy screeched to a halt near the firing line with the urgency of a combat response. Heavy doors slammed simultaneously, and the sound of military boots on concrete echoed across the suddenly silent range. Rodriguez stood frozen as senior personnel emerged from vehicles with purpose and authority that made his stomach drop. Colonel Hayes stepped out quickly from the lead vehicle, followed by Master Sergeant Valdez and several other senior NCOs Rodriguez didn't recognize. At 53, Colonel Hayes was a decorated veteran who had commanded both conventional and special operations forces during multiple combat deployments. His unexpected arrival at a routine sniper training exercise was unprecedented. Colonel Hayes walked directly toward Morrison, completely ignoring Rodriguez and the other Marines as if they were invisible obstacles. When Colonel Hayes reached Morrison's position, something remarkable happened. The colonel came to rigid attention and rendered the sharpest, most precise salute that anyone present had ever witnessed in their entire military careers. The salute was held with such perfection that it seemed to freeze time itself. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Harold Morrison, United States Marine Corps, retired," Colonel Hayes said, his voice booming across the suddenly silent range with authority that made every person present snap to attention. "Sir, on behalf of the United States Marine Corps, I apologize for the inexcusable disrespect shown to you here today." Morrison slowly returned the salute from his shooting position, movement still precise despite his age. "Colonel, no apology necessary. These Marines were following established training procedures." The colonel held his salute for 5 full seconds before dropping his hand with military precision. Rodriguez felt his knees go weak as reality crashed over him like a cold wave. Master Gunnery Sergeant was the highest enlisted rank in the Marine Corps, reserved for soldiers with decades of exceptional service and combat leadership. Colonel Hayes turned to address the stunned Marines. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce Master Guns Harold Ghost Morrison. He holds the Marine Corps record for longest confirmed kill at 1,347 meters set in Vietnam in 1969. He is also a recipient of the Medal of Honor, Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts." The Marines stood frozen as the implication sank in. They had been dismissing a living legend, a Marine whose combat record was literally taught in their sniper schools. Colonel Hayes continued, his voice growing more respectful. "Master Gans Morrison, techniques for reading environmental conditions are still taught in advanced marksmanship courses. His ability to make impossible shots under combat conditions was unparalleled." Morrison shifted uncomfortably behind his rifle, clearly uncomfortable with the public praise. "Colonel, these young Marines just need to understand that equipment doesn't replace fundamentals. This shot is well within their capabilities if they read the conditions properly."
Colonel Hayes nodded knowingly. Master Guns, would you be willing to demonstrate for these Marines? I think they could benefit from seeing real precision marksmanship. Morrison settled more firmly behind his rifle, his weathered hands finding familiar positions on the worn stock. I'd be happy to help, sir. The ancient rifle seemed to transform in Morrison's hands, becoming an extension of his will rather than just a mechanical tool. Morrison's breathing slowed to the steady rhythm that preceded his most difficult shots. His eye found the scope's reticle, and decades of experience took over. "Wind's coming off the western rocks at about 8 knots, he said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of absolute knowledge. It shears at the 800-meter mark, then reverses in that bowl by the white rocks. Mirage is running left to right through the first thermal, then boiling straight up at the target." He made 3 precise clicks of adjustment on his ancient unertal scope, movements so practiced they seemed automatic. The Marines watched in fascination as Morrison demonstrated techniques their instructors had only described in theory. Morrison's world narrowed to the crosshairs in his scope and the steel target shimmering in the distance. His finger found the trigger and applied first-stage pressure, taking up slack in the mechanism. His pulse slowed, his breathing nearly stopped, and his entire being focused on the moment when all variables would align perfectly. The shot, when it came, cracked across the range like thunder. The sound echoed off the distant hills as the .308 Winchester round began its journey toward the target that had defeated the best Marines could offer. 2.5 seconds later, the unmistakable ring of copper-jacketed lead striking hardened steel floated back across the range. Perfect center hit. The steel target sang with the impact, a sound that every Marine present would remember for the rest of their careers. Morrison worked the bolt smoothly, ejecting the spent case, and slowly rose from his shooting position. The ancient rifle had performed exactly as he knew it would, delivering precision that modern equipment had failed to achieve. Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Master Guns Morrison, I was completely out of line. I apologize for my disrespect and failure to recognize your expertise." Morrison gave him a tired but genuine smile. "Son, you were protecting your Marines and maintaining training standards. That's exactly what a good instructor should do. The failure wasn't yours, it was a breakdown in communication up the chain." Colonel Hayes reached into his briefcase and withdrew a small wooden box. Morrison's eyes widened slightly as he recognized it. "Master Guns, this belongs to you. It was lost in the Pentagon mail system for 30 years and finally found its way to my desk last week." He opened the box, revealing the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. "Heroes like you don't get forgotten, Master Guns. They just get temporarily misplaced by bureaucracy." Colonel Hayes carefully pinned the medal to Morrison's faded red work shirt, the bronze star looking oddly appropriate against the humble fabric. Colonel Hayes nodded approvingly. "For the next week, Master Guns Morrison will conduct advanced environmental reading and precision marksmanship training with this platoon. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, you will assist and coordinate the training schedule." As Morrison began the methodical process of cleaning his rifle, now wearing the Medal of Honor on his faded red shirt, Rodriguez finally understood the difference between modern technology and timeless skill. The greatest marksmen weren't those with the most expensive equipment, but those who understood the fundamental relationship between shooter, rifle, and environment. Morrison shouldered his ancient rifle with the same dignity he had carried throughout the encounter, preparing to return to his humble maintenance duties while carrying the quiet satisfaction of a teacher who had successfully passed on critical knowledge to a new generation.